Hello guys, and welcome to Dreamy Minds. Tonight, as you lie down and feel the familiar weight of your body meeting the bed, something ancient is already at work. An invisible pull, soft but unwavering, cradles you toward the center of the earth. Gravity, the same silent force that guides the moon around our planet, that shapes the tides and holds the mountains in place, is the reason your body can finally let go and rest. You are not floating away, you are held. Somewhere deep in the mind, far below the surface of your thoughts, your nervous system is listening to the pressure of the mattress against your skin, to the rhythm of your breathing, to the slow turning of the earth into night. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, to carry a day that felt too heavy, to worry that your thoughts will not quiet down. But there is a strange kind of kindness woven into the universe. The forces of nature do not ask you to be ready for them. They arrive, steady and patient, whether you notice them or not. In this gentle story, we will wander through those forces: the pull of gravity, the hush of darkness, the breathing of wind, the cadence of waves, the invisible threads of magnetism and time. We will listen to how they shape oceans and galaxies, and also how they soothe a single human brain preparing for sleep. We'll move slowly like a tide turning at the shore. We won't rush to explain. Instead, we will rest inside the images. The moon tugging at the sea, the sky dimming into blue, the quiet conversation of atoms, the way your heartbeat settles when you remember you are part of something vast. Like the stars waiting quietly behind the clouds, the most relaxing truths about nature are already here, above you, beneath you, within you. All you have to do is notice, very softly, that you are being carried. Let this be a story about that carrying, about the gentle science of the forces that never stop holding you, even when your eyes finally close. Right now, as you lie here, there is a subtle story unfolding beneath the surface of your awareness. Your body meets the bed, the pillow, the blanket. Fabric touches skin. Muscles loosen by half a degree, then half a degree more. And under all of that, almost too simple to notice, is one quiet truth. You are being gently pulled toward the earth. Gravity is not loud. It does not flash or shout. It is more like a slow, steady note held by an invisible musician, always playing, never needing applause. You have lived inside this note every moment of your life. Most days, gravity is just background. The reason your coffee stays in the cup, your keys fall to the floor, your feet know where down is. But tonight, in this soft space between waking and sleep, we can let gravity become something else. Not a number in a textbook, not an equation, but a kind of lullaby, a steady, unbroken hum that says, "I am here. You can rest. I will hold you." Imagine the earth now, not as a spinning ball of rock in the darkness of space, but as a vast, steady hand. A hand so wide that it curves gently under entire continents, so patient that it has been cupped in this same shape for billions of years. In this picture, you are resting in the center of that hand. Your bed, your room, your city, all of it resting in the curve of this quiet palm. Every muscle in your body is allowed to lean back into that support. Your shoulders don't have to lift. Your spine doesn't have to hold itself so straight. Your legs don't need to carry you anywhere. All day, your body has been working with gravity, pushing against it as you stood and walked and moved through your tasks. But now, as you lie here, you and gravity are no longer in opposition. You are aligned. You are moving in the same direction. Downward. Homeward. Into support. Somewhere deep in the mind, far below the level of conscious thought, a small, highly trained system is paying attention to this. Inside each of your inner ears is a tiny, water-filled world. Delicate canals curve in 3 directions, like tiny glass loops half filled with fluid. Resting within them, there are microscopic hairs and small crystal-like stones. Little grains of calcium that slide and shift as your head moves. During the day, when you turn your head quickly or stumble on a step, those stones move. The fluid rushes. The hairs bend. This system, your vestibular system, has one main job: to answer a very old, very important question. Are we falling? If you suddenly slip on ice or step too close to the edge of a drop, those tiny seas in your ears stir violently. Signals race upward to the brain, and an alarm sounds through your nervous system. Something is wrong. We might be falling. We need to catch ourselves. In a fraction of a second. Muscles tense. Your heart rate rises. Breathing quickens. The ancient protective circuits of survival wake up. But tonight, you are not falling. You are lying still. Feel how your head rests on the pillow, how your body is aligned along this horizontal world. The small stones in your inner ears, instead of sliding abruptly, rest gently in place. The fluid inside those canals is quiet. The hairs stand softly, not bent by sudden motion. To your brain, this calm is a message. It whispers, we are not tipping, not tumbling, not in danger. We are supported. We are safe for now. And the body believes this signal. The heart, hearing that things are stable, begins to soften its pace. Beats stretch a little further apart. No longer sprinting to keep up with imagined emergencies. Blood vessels loosen their grip. Breathing shifts from high in the chest to deeper, quieter movements in the belly. There is a name for this gentle turning of the internal tide. A shift away from the high-alert fight or flight systems toward the calmer, slower rest and digest pathways. But you don't need the names. You know the feeling. It is the way the body slowly uncoils, like a spring no longer pressed, like a tight fist opening fingertip by fingertip. Gravity plays a part in this, because when the body senses stable contact, a floor, a mattress, a pillow, ancient circuits that needed to be ready for sudden motion can begin to stand down. You can imagine your body as a stone that has been tumbling down a riverbed all day, bumped and spun by the current of tasks and conversations and worries. Now, at last, the current has grown slower, the water calmer and deeper. The stone begins to sink, heavier than the water around it, settling down until it finds a resting place on the riverbed below. There is no struggle in that settling, no drama, just the quiet honesty of weight meeting support. You, too, are allowed to do this. This is why so many people feel soothed by heavy blankets, thick covers that press down slightly on the body, like a soft, steady hand. Your skin, stretched over your whole form like a living map, is filled with tiny sensors. They measure pressure, touch, temperature. When the blanket rests on you, those sensors send a gentle chorus of signals upward. We are enclosed. We are contained. Nothing sudden is touching us. The nervous system interprets this as safety, as boundary, as a confirmation that the world is not chaotic in this moment, but predictable and still. Deep pressure, scientists have found, can lower levels of stress hormones, soothe restless bodies, even help some hearts slow their hurried beating. But we knew this long before the studies and the charts. We knew it in the way we swaddle babies, wrapping them snugly so they can feel the comforting reminder of the womb's close embrace. We knew it in the way we hold a frightened child, or pull a blanket tightly around our own shoulders when the world feels too sharp. To be held, to feel weight and containment, has always been one of the body's languages of safety. You might notice now the particular points where your own body is held. The weight of your head on the pillow, the warmth of the blanket along your legs, the soft pressure on your shoulders, your back, your hips. Each place of contact is a conversation. This is where you end and the world begins. And that edge is soft. And it is safe. If you like, you can let your awareness move slowly, like a small, curious light, over each part of your body that is being supported. Notice your feet, how they rest, perhaps slightly turned outward, no longer required to balance or step or carry. Notice your calves, sinking into the bed, muscles no longer subtly engaged to keep you upright. Your thighs, your hips, the broad, strong bones of your pelvis, all of them surrendering their daily work back to gravity. Your lower back, which so often has to fight to keep you standing straight, is now allowed to spread slightly wider, like ink on paper, like water finding its own level. As you notice each place that is being held, you might also notice the small places that are still bracing, muscles at the base of the neck, a bit of tightness in the jaw, shoulders drawn just a little higher than they need to be. It's normal for the body to hold on like this. Sometimes we carry the posture of our day into our night, the way we sat at a desk, the way we tensed in traffic, the way we stiffened during a difficult conversation. If you sense any of those leftover tensions, you don't have to force them to go away. Just remind them, very gently, that gravity has them now. You can imagine an invisible hand under each tensed place, supporting it from below, or imagine each tight muscle as a small child standing on tiptoe, trying to see over a high wall. You might whisper, inwardly, "You don't have to stand on tiptoe anymore. The view is not important now. You are allowed to come down, to sit, to lie, to be heavy." There is another kind of gravity at work inside you as well, the gravity of emotion. Strong feelings can feel like storms, like sudden gusts of wind whipping through the branches of the mind. Thoughts swirl like leaves, memories and fears and what-ifs tangling together in mid-air. It's normal to feel that way at the end of a long day. As the outer world grows quieter, the inner world sometimes grows louder. But just as the Earth's gravity gives the swirling air a ground to return to, your body can be the ground for your feelings. You don't have to stop the storm. You only have to give it somewhere soft to land. When you acknowledge what you feel, I am tired, I am anxious, I am sad, I am grateful, I am confused, something subtle begins to happen inside your brain. Areas involved in raw emotion, deep in the older parts of the mind, light up with activity. But when you put a gentle name to what you feel, another region, just behind your forehead, joins the conversation. A part that weaves language and meaning. Together, they create a kind of emotional gravity, pulling scattered reactions into a more coherent whole. Feelings that were swirling can start to settle, like sand drifting down through water, layering themselves on the bottom, instead of spinning endlessly in suspension. You don't have to find the perfect words. You don't have to analyze or solve. Simply recognizing, yes, this is here, is sometimes enough weight to let the feeling sink gently downward, to rest on the floor of your awareness, instead of rattling around your mind. Gravity in the physical world keeps your body from drifting, and emotional gravity, born from gentle awareness, keeps your inner world from flying apart. To feel anchored is one of the deepest kinds of rest. You can imagine, for a moment, what it might be like to have no gravity at all. Astronauts in orbit around the Earth experience a kind of perpetual falling, a delicate dance around the planet where weight seems to disappear. Their bodies float, their arms drift upward of their own accord, Objects glide slowly across the air with the slightest push. It looks magical from the outside. Yet inside, their bodies are constantly adjusting. Without gravity's steady pull, the inner ears grow confused. The stones and fluid in those tiny canals are no longer giving consistent information. The body is unsure of which way is down, because down has temporarily lost its meaning. Muscles and bones, no longer pressed upon by weight, begin to change. They can grow weaker, as if the body, missing its constant conversation with gravity, forgets part of how to be strong. Even sleep in space can be different. The body, not cradled by a mattress, must be tethered in place, gently strapped into a sleeping bag on a wall or ceiling. Floating, unrestricted, can be oddly unsettling. You, here on Earth tonight, do not have to navigate that strangeness. Your body knows, without thinking, where down is. It knows the shape of lying on a bed, the meaning of pressure under your back, the reassurance of weight in your limbs. Gravity, this simple, ever-present force, is a kind of constant companion in your nervous system's vocabulary. It gives reference, orientation, a felt sense of here and support it, and in that, there is such a gift. You might imagine now that your bones are very old, older than your years, made from ancient Earth itself, from minerals once dissolved in oceans, from dust that was once part of mountains. Those minerals have been accustomed to gravity for longer than there have been human beings at all. When you lie down, it is not just your muscles that relax. It is those old, mineral parts of you. Returning, briefly, to the restful patience of stone. You do not have to hold yourself up tonight. You do not have to be your own scaffolding. The earth is doing that for you. If you notice a sense of heaviness in your chest or your limbs or your thoughts, you might be tempted to call it a problem. We are often told that feeling heavy is wrong, that we must always be light, energetic, on the move. But heaviness, in this moment, can be a kindness. It can be your body's honest way of saying, I have carried enough today. I am ready to be carried. Let that heaviness be allowed. Let it be a message rather than a mistake. Imagine that every worry, every unfinished task, every sharp word you heard, or sharp word you wish you hadn't said, is a small stone you have been holding in your hands. All day long you've walked with your hands partly closed, palms curled around those stones. Now, in the dark quiet of this room, you can imagine slowly uncurling your fingers, letting each stone fall. Not away forever, just down into the wide, patient hand of the earth. You can pick them up again tomorrow if you truly need them. For now, gravity will keep them for you, right where you left them. As these imagined stones drop from your hands, your real hands may feel a little lighter, a little warmer. Your chest might feel slightly more open, less clenched. Somewhere deep in the mind, systems built to measure effort and strain. Take note, the load has lessened. It is safer still to rest. You are a small being on a vast world, held in place by the same force that keeps oceans hugging shorelines, and the moon circling overhead. The gravity that holds entire seas in their basins is the same gravity that holds your body to this bed, your head to this pillow, your heartbeat steady inside your chest. You are not separate from this force. You are an expression of it. When you allow yourself to sink into your bed, you are moving with the laws of the universe, not against them. You are doing exactly what bodies in gravity are meant to do. When the day is done, return to the ground. Give up the effort of standing. Trust that you will not fall through, that there is always something beneath you. Even if your life has felt unsteady, even if today was full of uncertainty, this one fact has not changed. The Earth is still here. Its pull has not wavered. Its hand has not opened. You are, in this moment, utterly and completely held. And as you rest inside this quiet embrace, you can let your mind drift, knowing that the invisible arms of gravity will go on cradling you all through the night, until morning light gently calls you back to the surface of waking. For now, there is nothing you must hold up, nothing you must carry, just the soft, continuous invitation to let go a little more, to sink a little deeper into gravity's quiet, endless embrace. Somewhere, far beyond the roof above you, the last light of day has already slipped below the curve of the Earth. Even if you did not see the sunset tonight, it happened. A quiet turning of the planet that slowly carried your part of the world away from the sun's direct gaze and into the soft arms of evening. Day became dusk. Dusk became night. Light thinned, like watercolor rinsed in water. Edges of things blurred. Shadows grew longer. And then, finally, the first stars began to show themselves. Patient as old friends, waiting for you to notice. Your body noticed, even if your mind was busy. All through the day, every bright surface, every glance at the sky, every screen and window and open door has been sending tiny parcels of light into your eyes. These photons, little messengers from the sun, reflected off 1,000 different things, have been slipping through your pupils, touching the delicate layers of your retina, and whispering, again and again, it is daytime. Stay awake, stay alert. The world is lit. Inside your head, just behind your eyes, lives a clock that listens to those whispers. Not a clock with ticking hands or digital numbers, but a tiny cluster of cells, no bigger than a grain of rice, nestled in the quiet dark of your brain. You might imagine it as a miniature lighthouse made of living tissue, or a small constellation of neurons glowing gently in the night sky of your mind. This cluster has a long name in science. But tonight, you don't need that. Tonight, it is simply your inner timekeeper, a faithful sentry that watches the comings and goings of light and tells the rest of your body what kind of world you are in. A bright, busy one, or a slow, shadowed one. All day, this inner lighthouse has been bathed in brightness. Special cells in your eyes, different from the ones that help you see shapes and colors, have been quietly measuring the overall glow of your surroundings. These cells aren't interested in the details. They don't care whether you are looking at a tree, a face, or a page of text. They care about one thing: how much light is there? They send their answer along delicate neural pathways straight to your inner clock. When the world is full of daylight, they sing a clear, bright song, a signal that says, now is the time to be awake. Now is the time to be outward, to think sharply, to move and act and do. And your body listens. Hormones that keep you alert rise like a tide in the morning. Your temperature climbs, your metabolism hums more loudly. Cells all across your body, in your liver, your muscles, your heart, take their cues from this central rhythm, aligning themselves like dancers who know the steps to a well-rehearsed routine. But the Earth is always turning, even on the busiest day, even when your schedule feels endless. The planet slowly tilts you away from the sun, drawing a curtain of darkness across the sky. As the light outside fades, the song those special eye cells send to your inner clock begins to change. Blue light, the bright, crisp kind that signals morning and noon, grows dimmer, muted by the thicker atmosphere of evening. The sky, once harsh and brilliant, softens into gentle blues and purples, then into the deep velvety navy of night. If you've ever watched a sunset without hurry, you may have felt something in you echo this change. A slight heaviness in the chest, a thoughtfulness that wasn't there at midday, maybe a quiet ache, as if the ending of the day reminded you of all endings, all the things that have passed, all the moments that will never come in exactly the same way again. It's normal to feel that way at dusk. Twilight is a threshold, a doorway between worlds, the bright one where we perform and strive and present ourselves to others, and the shadowed one where we return to our inner rooms, to reflection, to memory, to rest, somewhere deep in your brain. As the light shifts, your inner clock hears the change and begins its own twilight ritual. Imagine for a moment an orchestra at the end of a long, spirited concert. All day, the musicians have been playing bright, fast pieces. Music fit for dancing, for marching, for bustling through crowded streets. Now the conductor raises a hand, and gradually the music slows. The drums quiet, the brass softens. The strings take over, drawing out long, gentle notes that seem to hang in the air. This is what your inner clock does as day turns to night. It is the conductor of a choir you can't see, a choir made of chemicals and electrical rhythms, of temperature and heart rate, and subtle changes in how your cells use energy. One of the singers in this choir is a small, nightly messenger, often called the hormone of darkness. But you can think of it simply as a dusk-born musician, a quiet violinist who steps onto the stage, only when the lights dim, as the sky deepens in color, and your eyes report this softened light to your inner clock. A signal travels to a tiny gland perched near the center of your brain. In response, this gland begins to release a delicate substance into your bloodstream. You don't have to force it. You don't have to think, now I will make sleep chemicals. Your body knows. Drop by drop, moment by moment, this substance flows through you, reaching distant cells and whispering, "It is evening. Begin to slow. It is time to let the edges blur." Your core body temperature, which has been higher during the day, prepares to fall, like a stone sinking slowly through warm water. This cooling is not dramatic. You won't shiver or feel cold, but it is enough to nudge your mind towards sleep. For reasons woven deep into our biology, cooler inner temperatures signal that it is safe to rest, just as they did for our ancestors when night brought relief from the heat of the sun. As this inner cooling begins, you might notice your hands or feet feel a little warmer, your body quietly moving heat outward, sharing it with the air, so that your core can drift into its nighttime range. Somewhere, without you ever needing to supervise, your digestive system slows, as if pushing away from the table after a long meal. Your blood pressure dips. Your brain begins adjusting the balance of its own chemistry, preparing to move from the bright, fast waves of waking into the slower, deeper rhythms of sleep. All of this is part of the lullaby of darkness. Yet in the modern world, the sun is no longer the only source of light. Our homes glow long after sunset. Ceiling lights, desk lamps, television screens, phones shining inches from our faces. To the ancient parts of your brain, some of this light, especially the cold, bright blue tinged kind, still looks like midday. Those same special cells in your eyes that listen for the overall brightness of the world can be tricked into thinking the day has not yet ended. The conductor of your inner orchestra, still hearing a song of noon, may hesitate to call the night musicians forward. The quiet violinist of darkness waits in the wings, unsure if it is truly time to begin. And you, lying in bed, may feel that strange, frustrating contradiction. Your body is tired, but your mind feels as if it's still standing under a bright, invisible sun. It's normal to experience this, especially in a world that rarely dims. But even when your schedule pulls you off rhythm, even when your evenings glow brighter than your mornings, your inner clock does not vanish. Like the stars hidden behind the city's fluorescent haze, your natural circadian rhythm, the roughly 24-hour cycle of wakefulness and sleepiness, remains, waiting for clearer skies. When you gently dim the lights, when you let your screens rest, you are not doing something small. You are opening a curtain in your own brain, allowing the patient, ancient signals of darkness to reach the little lighthouse behind your eyes. Imagine turning down a dimmer switch in your room as each light softens, from bright white to warm amber, from sharp to gentle. Your inner clock sighs in relief. Yes, it says, this looks like evening. Now I can do what I was made to do. You might notice, in such softened light, that the world itself seems to change character. The room takes on a different personality. Objects lose their harsh outlines. Colors deepen and grow more muted. Corners that felt sharp in daylight become places for shadows to gather and rest. Your own reflection in a darkened window looks softer too, less defined by details, more like an impressionist painting of yourself than a crystal-clear photograph. In this blur, there is mercy. The roles you played during the day, the competent one, the responsible one, the one who answers messages, the one who gets things done, can loosen their grip. Dusk and the dim lights that follow offer you a kind of anonymity, even in your own life, a chance to be a little less precise, a little less certain, and a little more simply human. This is why twilight can feel like a psychological refuge. It is a hallway between rooms, a place where you are not required to stand so upright, where it is acceptable to lean against the wall and catch your breath. Some people feel a gentle sadness at this time of day, a vague, unnameable ache. If that is true for you, it does not mean something is wrong. Your brain is exquisitely sensitive to transitions. Endings have always stirred us. The end of a song, the end of a season, the end of a conversation we wished could last a little longer. Dusk is the daily ending of the visible world, the sun bowing out of sight, colors draining into shadow. Your mind responds honestly to this. It pauses, it considers, it gathers up the scattered pieces of the day and holds them all at once, for a brief, tender moment. You can let that feeling be. You do not have to fix it or push it away. You might imagine sitting beside your own mind at a window, both of you watching the slow fade of light. You do not need to talk. You simply sit together in the shared understanding that something is closing, and that it is okay to feel that closing. Then, as night deepens, another kind of light appears. Far above, beyond the reach of street lamps and house lights, small ancient fires burn in the dark, stars scattered across the sky. Some of that starlight began its journey long before you were born. It crossed the emptiness of space, traveled for years, even centuries, just to arrive here, brushing your world with its faint, steady glow. If you have ever stood outside on a clear night, away from the noise and glare of the city, you may have felt something inside you respond to that sky. A kind of widening, a soft awe, a wordless sense of belonging to something vast and old and mysterious. Starlight is quiet reassurance. It says without words, darkness is not empty. It is full of distant fires, of stories written in light, of patterns older than any worry you carry. Even if you can't see the stars tonight, hidden by clouds or city lights or the ceiling above you, they are still there, just beyond the veil. In the same way, your inner rhythms are still present, even when life makes it hard to feel them. Circadian cycles, those gentle, roughly daily oscillations of alertness and sleepiness. Body temperature and hormone levels are like constellations in the sky of your biology. Sometimes clouds of stress or storms of obligation can obscure them from your view. You may feel out of sync, unsure when to rest, caught between exhaustion and wired wakefulness. But underneath, your cells are still keeping time. Each one carries a tiny molecular clock, ticking away in a dance of proteins and genes, responding to signals from that central lighthouse behind your eyes. When you dim the lights, when you create small rituals at night, a warm drink, quiet music, turning your phone face down, stepping outside for a moment to feel the cooler air, you are gently wiping fog from the window so you can see those inner constellations again. You do not have to be perfect. You do not have to follow a strict schedule or meet some idealized standard of sleep hygiene. Your body is forgiving. Like a river finding its way back to the sea, it will keep trying to return to its natural rhythms, even when rocks and branches have shifted its path. You can help it with small kindnesses. A little more darkness when night comes, a little more light in the morning, a little more trust that feeling sleepy at night is not a failure of willpower, but a sign that your inner musicians are playing the right song. As you lie here now, perhaps the lights around you are already low. Shadows gather softly in the corners of the room. Your eyelids half closed or fully closed, let in only the faintest traces of the outside world. Behind them, the tiny timekeeper in your brain listens. If you've been awake for many hours, another system, your sleep drive, has been slowly building, like sand piling up in an hourglass. The more time you've spent awake, the more this need for sleep has grown, urging you, gently or loudly, toward rest. This homegrown sleepiness meets the circadian signals of evening, and together they tip you toward dreams. Your inner orchestra is now deep into its nocturne. The bright trumpets of alertness are quiet. The cellos of restfulness play long, resonant tones. The soft drum of your heart has slowed to a steady, reassuring beat. Light and darkness, which for so long in our history came only from the sky, are still the main conductors of this symphony. They lift you into wakefulness each morning, when dawn light touches your closed eyelids, slipping through skin and bone, nudging your inner clock with the message, a new day is beginning. Start the song again. They lower you into sleep each night, when darkness wraps your room like a shawl, and the absence of brightness becomes its own kind of presence. A spacious room where your mind can finally breathe. You are not separate from these cycles. You are not a machine running on artificial time. You are a creature of light and shadow, of dawns and dusks, of suns and stars. As you breathe here, in the quiet of this moment, you are being gently rocked by the turning of the earth itself, carried through another small arc of this endless, beautiful cycle of day into night, and night into day. You can let yourself move with it now, instead of against it. You can allow the darkness not to be frightening or empty, but a kind of soft, infinite blanket, drawn gently over the bright, busy thoughts of the day. Somewhere deep in your mind, your tiny lighthouse of cells nods in recognition. Yes, this is night. Now rest. And you, held by this ancient rhythm, can drift a little further into that rest. Eyes soft, breath slow, thoughts loosening like knots under warm water, as the lullabies of light and darkness continue their quiet, faithful song. Within you, if you like, you can imagine now that you are lying near the edge of a quiet sea. It is night, or perhaps the fading edge of evening. The air is cool and gentle. The sky above is a dark, deep blue. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the moon is rising, its pale light stretching a soft path across the water. You can't feel the sand beneath you in this bed, but you might imagine it, fine grains, still warm from the day, slowly giving up their heat to the night. And in front of you, the ocean breathes. A wave draws in, gathering itself far out, pulling threads of water from deep places. Then it rises, falls over, and spills its weight onto the shore. With a hush, a sigh, a low, comforting roar, the water creeps up the sand, pauses for a moment as if catching its breath, and then recedes again, leaving behind a thin sheen of foam that slowly sinks back into the earth over and over, advance and retreat, in and out, again and again. The ocean repeats this ancient motion. You could lie there for hours and never see the same wave twice. And yet, every wave would feel familiar, like verses of the same old song. This is the first rhythm. Far away, beyond the visible curve of the world, the moon is tugging softly at the seas. Its gravity reaches across the empty space between, pulling at entire oceans, the way you might pull gently on a loose thread. Because of this pull, great bodies of water on Earth swell and lean, rising slightly on the side facing the moon, and again on the far side, two bulges circling the globe as it spins. On the coasts, we feel this as tides, water climbing the shore, then slipping back. Harbors deepening, then emptying, boats rising in their slips, then settling lower. It happens so reliably that entire lives and routines have been built around it. Fishermen timing their work, sea creatures knowing just when to feed, plants clinging to tidal pools that fill and drain with predictable grace. The ocean's body is being moved by a companion it cannot see. And inside you, another kind of ocean is being moved too. You are mostly water, more ocean than stone. Within the borders of your skin, fluid moves and pulses in intricate rhythms, blood flowing through your veins, air filling and leaving your lungs, electrical waves rising and falling across your brain, far beneath your thoughts. Your heart is keeping time. In the upper chambers of that heart lives a cluster of special cells, not so different in concept from the small clock. Behind your eyes, these cells are your heart's pacemaker, its own quiet drummer. They generate tiny electrical signals, again and again, each one telling the heart muscle when to contract. Lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. You don't command it. You don't have to remember to send an instruction. The rhythm is automatic, as faithful as the turning of tides. During the day, when you are busy and moving and perhaps worrying, your heartbeats come a little more quickly, like short, choppy waves on a wind-stirred sea. Adrenaline and other alertness messengers whisper to the pacemaker, "Go faster. We might need more blood, more oxygen, more energy." Your heart obliges, ready to help you meet whatever the day brings. But at night, in the quiet you are in now, another voice speaks up inside you. Signals from the calmer side of your nervous system, the parasympathetic system, the one that loves rest and digestion and slow evenings, begin to reach your heart. They're like a gentle hand on the shoulder of the drummer, saying, "It's all right. The crowd has gone home. You can play slower now." And so the beats begin to space out. Each one still arrives in its steady time, but with more room between, more silence, more spaciousness. Somewhere deep in the mind, your brain is listening to this internal lullaby. It feels the slower rhythm of your heart and uses that as one more clue that it is safe to drift toward sleep. In your chest, another tide is moving. Your lungs are not seas of water, but seas of air. When you breathe in, your chest expands like a wave lifting itself, drawing in oxygen-rich air, the way the ocean draws water up the shore. When you breathe out, your chest gently falls, the air slipping out again like water retreating, carrying away carbon dioxide, small, invisible traces of your day. Inhale. The body receives. Exhale. The body releases. This too is a rhythm older than memory. When you were still floating in the amniotic ocean of the womb, you were not yet breathing air, but a primitive rhythm of practice was already forming. Small chest movements, preparing the body for the world that awaited. Now, your breathing continues through every waking conversation, every moment of silence, every dream. You can influence it if you choose. You can take a deeper breath, sigh, hold your breath briefly, or let it out in a long, theatrical exhale. And yet, when you stop paying attention, breathing does not stop. Another ancient circuit in your brainstem takes over the responsibility, measuring the gases in your blood, adjusting each breath to what your body quietly needs. Tonight, you might let your awareness rest on the simple feeling of air moving in and out, not as a task, not as something to do well, but as a place to watch the tides within you. Feel the coolness at the tip of your nose as you inhale, or the gentle expansion of your chest. Notice the slight warmth of the exhale, like a faint, invisible mist of your own weather, leaving your body. Listen if the room is quiet enough for the soft sound your breath makes, faint as small waves on a distant shore. Somewhere deep in your mind, ancient survival networks are listening too. Your brain has evolved to constantly predict what might happen next. This is one of its primary habits: to forecast, to simulate, to prepare. Is there danger? Is there noise? Is the pattern broken? Do we need to tense? Do we need to run? Uncertainty can feel like turbulence in this inner ocean. When the brain cannot detect a clear pattern, it spends more energy scanning and worrying, turning its gaze again and again to the horizon of what-ifs and maybes. But when your brain hears steady, reliable rhythms, it can rest. The predictable crash of waves, the ticking of a clock, the hum of a fan, the gentle, repetitive fall of rain. These sounds tell the forecasting parts of your mind nothing sudden is coming. This moment looks like the last, and the next moment will look like this one. And so the watchful circuits, long adapted to scan for threats, can soften. This is one of the reasons a slow, steady voice can feel so soothing. Each word falls into place like a small, reliable wave. The pauses come where you expect them to come. The tone does not leap or lurch, it simply flows, like water finding its way around stones. Your brain, hearing this, does not have to brace for surprise. It knows the shape of the experience, and within that familiarity, it can begin to close its many eyes. The rhythms of your heart and lungs are part of this same calming orchestra. When your breathing is jagged or fast, the brain reads it as possible danger. When your heart hammers, it asks, "What is wrong? What are we running from?" But when your breathing begins to slow, lengthening on the exhale, and your heart follows with its slower, deeper beats, your brain receives a different message. Perhaps we are safe. Perhaps we can stand down, like a harbor knowing the tide chart. It begins to trust that this low, steady rhythm will continue. Deeper still, beneath heart and lungs, Another rhythm forges its own tides, the waves of electrical activity in your brain. If you could look into your skull with a device that listens to this inner ocean, an electroencephalogram or EEG, you would not see thoughts or pictures. You would see patterns of voltage rising and falling over and over again across the surface of your brain during the day. When you are fully awake and engaged, these patterns tend to be small and rapid, like choppy waves in a strong wind. They are busy, efficient, suitable for reacting quickly, and tracking many things at once. As you grow quieter, as you lie down in the dark, and let your eyes close, those patterns begin to change. Even before sleep, when you are simply resting with closed eyes, your brain often shifts into slightly slower waves, a kind of relaxed idling, like the ocean on a calm day, still moving, but with less urgency. As you hover at the edge of sleep, another transformation begins. The waves stretch out, growing larger and slower, like long, gentle swells rolling in toward shore. Scientists sometimes give these waves Greek names and draw them as lines on paper, measuring their frequency and height. But you don't need the numbers. You can feel the essence of it in the way your thoughts change when you are very sleepy. Ideas that were once sharp begin to blur together, like colors bleeding into each other in water. Time feels less strict, less like a series of hard-edged moments, and more like a soft river, carrying one impression into the next. Your brain is not shutting down. Even though it may feel that way, it is entering a different mode of rhythm, one made for repair, for memory weaving, for emotional processing, for rest. In this new mode, waves of activity sweep across your brain in deep, slow pulses, like giant undersea currents reorganizing the sand on the ocean floor. Cells that fired quickly and in complex patterns during the day now participate in this simpler, broader dance, strengthening some connections, letting others quietly fade. Somewhere inside this, dreams may begin. Fragile images rising like bubbles from the depths of your subconscious ocean, popping gently at the surface of awareness. You do not have to manage any of this. You are the ocean, not the one counting the waves. And just as the physical ocean is shaped not only by tides and winds, but by unseen currents deep below, your inner world is shaped by emotional tides as well. Feelings, too, move in rhythms. There are moments when joy rises suddenly, unexpected and bright, like a sunlit wave splashing over rocks. Other times, sadness or fear or anger surges up with surprising force, filling your inner shoreline with a heavy, unfamiliar water. When you are in the middle of such a feeling, it can seem as if it will never leave. The water is so high, the current so strong, that you might believe. This is simply how things are now. Flooded, overwhelmed, forever. It's normal to feel this way. Our brains are wired to take present states very seriously. If something feels painful now, the mind often assumes it may always feel this painful. But nature gently, patiently, offers us another story. Walk along any beach at low tide, and you will see proof that the highest waters do not stay. Lines of seaweed, patterns of shells, drifts of foam, all these mark where the ocean once reached, and then quietly retreated from. Nothing in the natural world stays at high tide. Every crest is followed by a fall. Every full shore empties again, making space for the next cycle. Your feelings follow similar laws. In your brain, emotional surges are often accompanied by waves of chemical messengers, adrenaline, cortisol, and more, that help you respond to perceived threats or losses. They rise quickly, so that you can act if you need to, but over time, if you are not constantly adding new fuel to the fire. With more frightening thoughts or fresh stresses, those chemicals begin to break down, to be reabsorbed or cleared from your system. The emotional wave, if allowed to be felt, without panicked resistance, will eventually lose height. It may leave a mark, a memory, a lesson, a lingering tenderness, but its sharpest crest will soften. This is why sometimes you may wake up after a difficult day and notice that the feeling is not as strong. The problem may not be solved. Nothing outside you may have changed. And yet, inside, the tide of intensity has rolled back just a little. You can help this process, not by forcing an emotion to leave, but by letting it move, like watching a wave approach, without turning your back on it, seeing it rise, feeling it touch your feet, then watching it recede. You can observe your own emotions as changing experiences, not fixed truths. I feel anxious right now is different from I am anxiety, I feel sad in this moment is different from I am sadness. The first allows room for the possibility of the tide changing. The second traps you on one shoreline forever, somewhere deep in the mind, when you name and notice a feeling. With gentle curiosity, the storm centers of the brain and the calmer, more reflective regions begin to communicate. It is as if you are standing on a cliff, watching the sea below, aware of its power, but not drowning in it. Tonight, as you rest, you might sense your own body as a coastline. Your skin is the shoreline's edge, the border between inner sea and outer world. Beneath it, currents of blood and breath and thought rise and fall, guided by moons of chemistry, winds of perception, tides of experience. You do not have to control these rhythms. You could no more command your heart to beat in a perfect pattern than you could order the ocean to send in exactly 3 waves and no more. Your work, if it can even be called work, is simply to notice when you are bracing against the natural movements. Inside you, are you clenching against your own breath, holding it without realizing, as if you could stop time by refusing the next inhale? Are you judging the rise of a feeling instead of letting it crest and fall in its own time? If you find that you are, it's okay, it's so normal. You have been taught, perhaps, that stillness must mean total quiet, total control, total absence of motion. But true stillness, the kind that invites sleep, is often more like the stillness of a wide, open sea. Nothing frantic, nothing forced, just slow, rolling rhythms that go on and on. You are being carried by forces larger than thought: gravity, time, circadian rhythms, the inborn pace of your heart, the quiet metronome of your lungs, the shifting waves of your brain. Like a small, safe boat on a vast, gentle ocean, you can let yourself rock with them now. If a thought rises, let it be a wave, coming toward you, touching the mind, then moving on. If a feeling wells up, let it be a tide, acknowledged, felt, trusted to recede. Your inner oceans know their own way back to calm. Somewhere deep in the mind, old survival alarms are dimming, lulled by the repetition of your breath, the softness of your heartbeat, the steady sound of this moment. The moon is still pulling on the seas, far away and above. Tides are turning on every coast. Waves are rising and falling on shores you will never see. And inside you, with every slow inhale, every gentle exhale, every easing beat of your heart, a quieter tide is turning too. guiding you, patiently, inevitably, toward the deep restorative waters of sleep. Somewhere outside your window, the night air is moving. It might be drifting softly through the trees, sliding along rooftops, brushing over quiet streets. It might be rattling a loose sign, or barely stirring the leaves of a plant in a windowsill, or moving so gently that nothing visible seems to notice. And yet it is there, an invisible river flowing over everything. The world is wrapped in air, an ocean of breath so vast we forget it is there at all. And you are resting inside it, like a small, safe bay, held within a wider sea. If you like, you can imagine the wind traveling tonight, coming down from cooler layers of the atmosphere, curling over mountains, dancing along open fields where grasses bend and whisper, slipping between tall buildings, and finally arriving here, outside the walls that surround you. Some of that air will soon become your next breath. You live inside this invisible ocean, and it lives inside you. Breathing is the most intimate conversation you have with the world. In, out, in, out. With every inhale, you welcome in molecules that have been part of countless other stories, circling the globe, feeding forests, filling the lungs of animals and people you will never meet. With every exhale, you return something of yourself to the air, carbon from the food you have eaten, traces of your day, small invisible tokens of your existence, offered back to the sky. This exchange happens whether you pay attention or not, somewhere deep in your brainstem, in ancient regions that formed long before language or thought, live small clusters of cells, whose only purpose is to keep you breathing. They measure the chemistry of your blood, taste how much oxygen and carbon dioxide is there, and adjust your breathing accordingly. Faster when your body needs more, slower when it can rest. You don't need to remind yourself to inhale at 3 a.m. You don't need to schedule your breaths on a calendar. They arrive like waves on a shore, one after another, faithful and unhurried. And yet, unlike many other automatic processes in your body, breathing is something you can touch with your attention. You can choose, if you wish, to take a deeper breath or to let out a longer sigh. This makes breath a bridge, a link between the parts of you that act on their own and the parts of you that can choose. Tonight, in this quiet moment, you might let that bridge become a place to rest. Somewhere deep in the mind, a network of nerves listens to each breath you take. Mechanical sensors in your lungs and chest. Notice how much the ribs expand, how quickly the air moves. They send their messages up thin, delicate fibers to regions of your brain that care very much about safety. Places that ask, are we calm? Are we rushing? Are we in danger? When your breathing is quick and shallow, those regions pay close attention. Rapid breaths are often a sign of effort or alarm, running from something, arguing, anticipating pain, carrying heavy bags up a hill. Fast, high breathing tells the body, we may need to fight or flee. In response, the heart may beat faster, muscles tense, the mind scan more anxiously for threats. It's normal for this to happen. These responses are not flaws. They are the result of millions of years of the body learning how to protect you. But this same listening system also hears when your breathing slows. Imagine your breath as a pendulum. When you lengthen your inhale slightly, and especially when you allow your exhale to become longer and softer, it is as if the pendulum's swing grows wider, slower, more graceful. Sensors in your chest and lungs notice this new rhythm and send a different message to the brain. Perhaps things are safe. Perhaps we can relax. when that message is received. Another network, an older and kinder one, begins to glow a little brighter. This is the parasympathetic system, the body's built-in invitation to rest, to digest, to repair. If the stress networks are like an accelerator pedal, pushing your body into action, the parasympathetic system is the gentle brake that allows you to slow, to coast, to stop without jolting. Running through this system, like a long river from your brain down through your chest and abdomen, is a remarkable nerve. You can imagine it gliding through you now, a wandering current of communication, passing by your throat, sliding behind your heart, branching delicately into your lungs, weaving through your digestive organs. In science, it's called the vagus nerve, from a word that means wandering, because it travels so widely through the inner landscape of your body. But tonight, you might simply think of it as a quiet messenger, or a river that carries news from your body to your brain, and from your brain back to your body. When your breath is tight and fast, this river carries signals of alertness upstream. The chest is tense, the heart is pounding. We might not be safe. Your brain, hearing this, may feel more on edge, but when you allow your exhale to grow just a little longer, just a little softer, without straining, without forcing, the river begins to carry a different story. Each slow breath out is like a small, gentle letter sent along the vagus nerve, addressed to your heart, your lungs, your gut, and then onward to your brain. The letter reads, the pressure is lowering, the air is easy, you are safe enough in this moment to rest. Your heart, hearing this message, may slow by a beat or two. Your stomach may unclench, signaling that it is no longer bracing for the unknown. Your mind may feel, even if just slightly at first, less stormy. This is not magic, it is biology, played out in the softest of ways. You do not need to control every breath. You do not need to count or measure. Unless that feels comforting, simply noticing that the air going out of you can leave a little more slowly than the air coming in is often enough. To begin this inner conversation of calm, try, if you wish, to feel the journey of one breath. Air touches your nostrils, slips along the back of your throat, spills into the branches of your lungs, down and down, into smaller and smaller passageways, until finally it reaches tiny sacs, where the real exchange happens. There, oxygen, shining, invisible, silent, passes into your blood, and carbon dioxide slips out. With each breath, billions of these trades take place, like tiny handshakes, between you and the world. Then, the air begins its journey back out, through the same branching pathways up past your heart, through your throat, out of your nose or mouth, perhaps warming your lips as it goes. This whole process takes only a few heartbeats, but when you bring your attention to it, time seems to widen around it, like a river flowing more slowly, sunlight stretching along its surface. Somewhere deep in your mind, there is a place that notices all of this, a region that maps your internal sensations, as if painting a quiet portrait of what the body is feeling at any given moment. This is where signals of pain and comfort, tightness and ease, thirst and fullness jointly arrive. Breath is one of its favorite subjects. By gently focusing on the feeling of your breathing, you give this inner painter more light, more clarity. It can render your internal landscape in softer, kinder detail. When this happens, something interesting tends to occur. The noise of racing thoughts often begins to fade into the background, just a little. Thoughts, after all, are like gusts of wind. They appear suddenly, sometimes from far away, sometimes from nowhere you can name. They swirl through the open space of your mind, rustling memories and plans, lifting old worries like leaves from the ground. Some gusts are gentle, a stray image from today, the line of a song, a fragment of conversation. Others are stronger, a regret, a fear, a what if that shakes the branches of your attention. It's normal to feel that your head is crowded with these winds, especially at night, when the outer world grows quieter and the mind finally has space to hear its own weather. But just as you do not have to chase the actual wind, as it moves through the trees, you do not have to chase every thought that moves through your awareness. You can let them come. You can let them go. Breath can help with this. Imagine your mind as a wide open field, and your thoughts as currents of air, passing over the tall grass. The grass bends, then stands upright again. The wind moves on. You are not the wind, you are the field. You are the ground beneath. When a thought arises, I should have done that differently. What if tomorrow goes wrong? You might picture it as a small gust, moving across the field. You notice it, you feel its touch, and then you return your attention to your breathing, to the steady rhythm of in and out. Each time you do this, you are choosing to align yourself, not with the gusts overhead, but with the deeper, more constant flow underneath, the movement of air through your lungs, the quiet messages along the vagus nerve, the slow grounding pulse of your heart. In this way, breathing becomes both a force of nature and a gentle choice. Air by itself is moved by physics, by differences in temperature and pressure, by the heating and cooling of land and sea. Warm air rises, cool air sinks, and the atmosphere responds with breezes and winds, currents that circle the globe. Inside you, similar principles are at play, though in a smaller, more intimate theater. Temperature shifts as your body prepares for sleep. Blood vessels dilate and constrict. Your lungs expand and relax. The air you draw in passes over warm tissues, picking up heat, moisture, the faint signature of your inner world. When you breathe out slowly, you are not only adjusting your nervous system, you are also, in a very real sense, sharing those inner conditions with the night. You become part of the atmosphere's story, and it becomes part of yours. If your breathing feels tight at first, or if noticing it makes you self-conscious, that is okay. It is so normal. Sometimes, after long days of stress, the body forgets what relaxed breathing feels like. The muscles between the ribs get used to working harder. The diaphragm, that broad, domed muscle beneath your lungs, forgets how to move freely. You might notice your breath sitting higher in the chest, fluttering shallowly, as if unsure if it is truly welcome. There is no need to scold yourself for this. It is simply a trace of how hard your body has been trying to keep you going. You can meet that tightness with the same kindness you would offer a startled animal. You might inwardly say, "It's all right. You don't have to change all at once. We can just be here, breathing exactly as we are, and see what softens on its own." Often, when no one is demanding that the breath be different, it gradually begins to change by itself, like a frightened creature, deciding to come a little closer once it realizes it is not being chased. Perhaps you'll notice, after a few minutes, that one exhale has grown unintentionally longer, like a sigh of relief you didn't know you were holding. Perhaps you'll feel your shoulders drop half a centimeter, or your jaw loosen, or your belly rise just a little more with each in-breath. Each of these is a small sign that the river of the vagus nerve is carrying quieter messages now, whispering to your organs, "We are safe enough to release a bit more." The wind outside tonight will keep moving, whether you are aware of it or not. Air will travel from one side of the planet to the other, carrying with it seeds, storms, the scents of flower fields and distant fires. Inside you, the wind of your breath will also continue, wave after gentle wave, even while you sleep. As you drift into deeper stages of rest, your breathing pattern will change again, usually becoming slower, more regular. Like the calmest of breezes, your body, relieved of the need to move and speak and plan, will settle into the minimum it needs to keep everything nourished. Your brain, rocked by its own slower rhythms, will let go of its detailed watch over the outer world and turn inward to its nightly tasks of sorting memories, repairing tissues, resetting subtle balances. Through all of this, breath continues to weave its quiet thread, binding moments together, linking waking and sleeping with the same gentle motion. You are part of a much larger flow. The same oxygen you inhale may have been part of a forest's canopy yesterday. The carbon you breathe out may feed a plant that will, in time, release new oxygen back into the sky. The patterns of wind that move clouds above cities and fields are distant cousins to the micro winds within your lungs. When you notice your breathing, you are not just paying attention to a bodily function. You are remembering that you belong to a world of currents and cycles, of storms and calms, of invisible movements that connect every living thing. By letting your own breath soften, you are, in a small way, joining the natural tendency of this planet toward balance, toward the settling after the storm, the hush after the gust, the coolness that follows a hot day's wind. As you lie here now, you might imagine that with each exhale, you release not only air, but a fraction of your worry, letting it ride the wind outward, dissolving into the wide, forgiving sky. And with each inhale, you receive not only oxygen, but a quiet kind of reassurance carried on the air, from forests and fields and oceans, a message that says, you are part of this, you are allowed to rest. The world will go on breathing with you. Somewhere deep in the mind, these truths settle, not as sharp thoughts, but as feelings, as a sense of being gently held within something larger and kinder than any single day. The wind will keep moving, your breath will keep flowing, and slowly, with each unhurried in, with each softened out, the storms within you will find their own way to quiet. Outside, the larger forces of the world are still at work, gravity holding oceans in their basins, the wind brushing past buildings and trees, the slow tides of night deepening across the sky. But now, for a while, we'll travel in the other direction, not outward, but inward, down, and down, and down again, into the small and the quiet, into the realm of the invisible threads that hold everything together. If you look around your room, everything seems so solid. Your bed, the wall, your own hands. If you lift them slowly into the dim light, it all looks still, unchanging, calm. Yet, hidden beneath that calm is a world of motion and connection that never stops. Imagine, just for a moment, that your vision could gently sharpen, not in brightness, but in depth. You could look at the surface of your blanket and see not just fabric, but fibers, then smaller threads woven together, twisted from even finer strands. Smaller still, down into the molecules that make up those threads, long chains of atoms, holding hands in patterns that give the blanket its texture, its softness, its warmth. And if you kept going, down beyond what any eye can see, you'd find yourself in the quiet, buzzing world of the atom. At this scale, the familiar idea of solid begins to soften. An atom is mostly empty space. At its heart sits a dense, tiny nucleus, and around it, a small storm of electrons, negatively charged particles, whirling in invisible clouds. If matter were only this, you might imagine everything passing through everything else, like ghosts drifting through walls. You, the bed, the floor, the earth itself, all made of these mostly empty atoms, could simply slide through one another. But that isn't what happens. You are lying on your bed. You feel supported. You do not sink into the floor, do not fall through the earth. Something is holding you up. At the heart of that something is a quiet, constant force, electromagnetism. When the electrons in the atoms of your body come close to the electrons in the atoms of the mattress, they do not like to occupy the same place. Tiny charges push against tiny charges. A dance of repulsion and attraction, keeping each atom in its own space. We call it an invisible force, but you feel its presence every time you sit in a chair. And do not pass through it. Every time your hand rests on a table, every time your head touches the pillow, and stays there, you can imagine these electromagnetic forces as threads of light, stretching between particles, sometimes pulling them together, sometimes holding them apart just enough to create shape, structure, form. Thread by thread, they weave atoms into molecules, molecules into cells, cells into tissues and organs, organs into the whole of you. Right now, countless such threads are at work in your body. They hold the double helix of your DNA in its elegant spiral. They keep the proteins in your muscles folded just so. They let the lipids in your cell membranes line up neatly, forming protective barriers around your inner world. Without these unseen tugs and pushes, you would simply disperse into a mist of particles. Instead, you remain whole, a single resting person, woven together by fields and forces you never have to see. Even your heartbeat owes itself to these invisible movements. Deep in your chest, in the muscle of your heart, certain cells are a little different from the rest. They are not just muscle, they are also rhythm makers, tiny conductors that set the pace for each contraction. Inside these cells, charged particles, sodium, calcium, potassium, move in and out through delicate channels in their walls. As they flow, they create small ripples of electricity. These ripples spread from cell to cell, like a wave passing along the surface of a pond, telling each part of your heart when to squeeze, when to rest. Lub-dub, a soft, repeating drum, playing under everything you do. You feel it as a beat, steady or slow, sometimes faster after climbing a hill or hearing bad news. But underneath the feeling is a choreography of charges, electrons and ions, following laws of electromagnetism. So reliable that your heart has been beating in this way since long before you could remember. Your brain, too, is lit by this invisible electricity in the folds and curves within your skull. Billions of neurons reach out to one another with branching arms. Where two branches meet, there is a gap, the tiny space across which signals must leap. Sometimes they leap as chemicals, drifting across the gap to bind to the next cell. Sometimes, and always eventually, they leap as voltage, shifts in charge that race down the long fibers of neurons, like very fast, very quiet lightning, every time you remember a face, or hear a song in your head, or imagine a place you love. Small storms of this electrical activity spark across your brain's networks. A beloved voice appears in your mind, somewhere a cluster of neurons that has fired together many times before. wakes up in just that pattern. A familiar face swims into view behind your eyes. Other clusters join in, adding details of eyes, mouth, the feeling you get when that person smiles at you. We sometimes imagine memories as still pictures in a drawer. But really, they are reenactments, brief, shimmering replays of electrical and chemical patterns that once unfolded in real time. The fact that you can bring them back is because the connections between those neurons have been strengthened, reinforced by repetition, like paths in a forest, deepened by many footsteps. All of this, again, is held together by forces you cannot see. Tiny attractions between charged particles, tiny repulsions that keep things in just the right place. From these, your inner world of images and feelings is created moment by moment. Electromagnetism does not only shape the very small, it reaches out into larger scales too. The planet itself is wrapped in a magnetic field generated deep within its molten core. This field stretches far into space, like a soft, invisible cloak, guiding compasses, helping some animals find their way across oceans and continents, shielding us from certain charged particles streaming from the sun. And within your own chest, each time your heart contracts, the moving electrical charges create a faint magnetic field of their own, too small to feel, but detectable with delicate instruments. You are, in a literal sense, a small source of magnetism, resting within a larger one. Perhaps it is no surprise, then, that we often talk about people as if they, too, were magnetic. There is a quiet science behind the feeling that some presences soothe us almost instantly. When you sit with someone you trust, a friend, a partner, someone who feels safe to your nervous system, something subtle often happens. Your breathing may begin to fall into a similar rhythm. Your heartbeats, though not identical, can start to mirror each other in their patterns, speeding and slowing in gentle coordination. This is not magic. It is co-regulation. Two nervous systems, linked by sight and sound and tiny signals in the voice and face, adjusting to one another. The curve of a smile, the softness in someone's eyes, the warmth in a tone of voice. These cues travel through your ears and eyes, into sensitive regions of your brain that are always asking, am I safe with this person? When the answer is yes, stress pathways can quiet. The body can afford to lower its guard. In this way, another person's calm can help call forth your own. You might think of it as magnetic alignment, your internal compass needle, turning to match the steady field around it. This can happen in tiny ways you might not even notice. A shared laugh loosens both sets of shoulders, sitting side by side in silence, reading or watching the rain. You may find your exhales synchronizing, your posture mirroring. Hugging someone for more than a brief moment, you might feel both of your breathing patterns, finding a shared tempo. Inside your body, chemicals respond to these signals too. One of them, often mentioned gently in conversations about bonding, is oxytocin. Oxytocin is not just a love hormone, though it is sometimes called that. It is a small, powerful messenger that encourages trust, softens defenses, and deepens the sense that you and I are safely connected. It is released in many kinds of closeness: when a parent holds an infant, when two people embrace, when friends share a moment of sincere understanding, even when you pet an animal you adore. Some of this oxytocin travels through your bloodstream, some acts within your brain. Wherever it goes, it tends to lower stress responses, to invite warmer feelings, to make social connection feel rewarding and safe. You can imagine it as a soft chemical ribbon that nature uses to tie us gently to one another, Over time, repeated experiences of safety with someone create more than just momentary surges of oxytocin. They carve patterns into the structure and wiring of your brain. Regions that detect threat learn to quiet more quickly in that person's presence. Areas involved in pleasure and reward light up more easily when you see their face or hear their voice, even in their absence. Just remembering them can trigger a faint echo of these responses. You might think of these patterns as constellations of connection inside your mind. Each star in the constellation is a neuron or cluster of neurons that participated in moments of warmth. The neuron that lit up when you heard them laugh, the neuron that fired when you felt their hand in yours, the neuron that helped store the words they said when you needed comfort. Together, they form a shape, not in the sky, but in the living architecture of your brain. And, like constellations, even when clouds of stress or time pass across your internal sky, the pattern remains, waiting to become visible again, whenever conditions allow. This is why you can feel soothed by thinking of someone kind, even when they are far away. Why a memory of being truly seen and accepted can still bring warmth to your chest. Years later, inside your body, those invisible threads of connection never quite disappear. They may go quiet for a while, like a dormant network of paths through a winter forest, but the tracks are still there, waiting for the snow to melt, ready to be walked again. At night, when the world grows stiller, you may feel the ache of missing someone more sharply. Silence has a way of bringing both presence and absence into clearer focus. It's normal to feel a little emptier then, to wish someone you love were closer, in the same room, on the same pillow, breathing the same patch of air. If that feeling is with you now, you don't have to push it away. You can gently notice it, the way you might notice a small pull in the tide, a current leaning in a particular direction. Underneath the loneliness, there is something tender, the simple truth that you are a being made for connection. Your nervous system was shaped in the cradle of other nervous systems, through the eyes and hands and voices of those who once cared for you as best they could. Certain patterns of safety and soothing became etched into you then, and others were added later, through friendships, loves, moments of kindness from strangers, even from stories and songs that made you feel less alone. These traces live on inside you. They appear when you take comfort in your own touch, a hand resting on your chest, an arm wrapped around yourself. They speak up when you hear a familiar melody and feel suddenly understood. They glow softly when you realize that someone, somewhere, has felt what you are feeling now. In a quiet room, with no one physically beside you, you are still held in an intricate web of remembered care. Your body's chemistry, its wiring, its folded, branching networks of cells bear the imprints of everyone who has ever made you feel safe, even for a moment. Like the electromagnetic forces that keep your atoms from drifting apart, these relational forces help keep your inner world coherent, giving you reasons to move forward, stories of belonging to return to when you need them. Tonight, as you lie in the dark, you are surrounded by layers of invisible support. There is the bed beneath you, its structure held firm by attractions and repulsions between uncountable tiny charges. There is your body, cells knit together by molecular threads, tissues held in gentle tension, organs humming with electrical rhythms that never quite sleep. There is the faint magnetic field of your heart, rising and falling with each beat, singing softly into the space around you. There is the Earth's magnetic field outside, stronger and older, wrapping you in its great, unseen embrace. There are the imprints of connections, old and new, traced into your neural pathways, like constellations of comfort, memories that can still warm you when you call them back. And somewhere, beyond walls and miles, other hearts are beating, other lungs are breathing, other minds are drifting toward sleep. Some of those hearts belong to people you know. Some belong to strangers you will never meet. All of them, like you, are held together by the same invisible threads. You are not outside this web, you are woven into it. Even when you feel separate, even when your room is silent, you are continuously interacting with forces and fields and memories that remind you, at the smallest levels of existence, that you are part of something shared. Much of what keeps you safe and whole is too small to notice, too quiet to hear directly. But it is steady, enduring, always at work, inside your cells, inside your thoughts, inside the space between you and everyone you have ever cared for. As you breathe here, perhaps a little more slowly now, you can allow this knowing to settle over you like a soft blanket. You are made of held-together things. You are surrounded by held-together things. You exist in a universe that has chosen again and again to pull pieces into wholeness, rather than let them fly apart. And in that universe, on this night, you are allowed to rest, cradled by invisible threads that will keep holding you, even as you drift, gently, quietly, into sleep. And now, we have walked together through so many quiet forces. The steady pull of gravity holding you in place, the patient dance of light and darkness guiding your inner clock, the oceanic rhythms echoing in your heartbeats and brainwaves, the wind of your own breath moving gently through you, the invisible threads binding atoms into bodies and bodies into relationships, the slow, unhurried passage of time, inviting you to release your grip. Somewhere deep in the mind, these stories settle, not as facts to remember, but as feelings, a sense that you are not separate from nature, but an expression of it, a small, tender piece of a vast design that has always known how to move toward balance, toward restoration, toward sleep. It's normal to still feel little eddies of thought, small ripples of worry or memory. You don't have to push them away. The same forces that calm oceans and turn night into morning are already at work inside you, smoothing the surface of the mind in their own time. Like the stars waiting quietly above the roof, your nervous system is quietly reorganizing itself, guided by rhythms older than language. You are allowed to rest inside that process, without understanding every detail. You are allowed to be carried. As this story fades, you might picture yourself held in a web of gentle powers. The earth beneath you, the air around you, the tides of your breathing, the subtle electricity of your heart, the slow current of time. Nothing here asks you to be anything more than you are in this exact moment. You can let your thoughts grow softer at the edges, like distant shorelines disappearing into mist. You can let your body grow heavier, as if gravity were tucking you in. And whether you drift into sleep now or simply rest in this quiet, the forces of nature will keep watching over you, steady, patient, and kind, until your mind is ready to let go and wander into dreams.